Welcome to Project Further. I'm April Omer. As the mother of two teenage girls who've been involved in youth soccer for many, many years, it became apparent to my family and I that there are opportunities and information that's not always easy to access or easily available, especially if you live in a place like we do, which is a small town. As a result, we created Project Further to hopefully serve as a resource for girls in youth soccer and their families who are interested in playing the beautiful game at the highest of levels. I'm in the studio today with my producer, Lo Ballard, and we're going to talk a little bit about what Project Further means and hopefully let you get to know me and my family a little bit more and also what our goals are as far as providing a pathway and access and opportunity for more girls to play soccer and go further.
Well, welcome everybody. We are so excited to have you here joining us today. So let's get into it. Like, how did this all begin for you and your family?
Okay. So our experience with soccer began very, very early. My girls were very, very young. And like a lot of parents, we started out by just putting them in a lot of different sports. We knew that we wanted them to be active. They're both natural athletes. So we tried softball, we tried golf, they've played tennis, and they were really, really good at all those things. But when they got exposed to soccer, it just really clicked, especially for our 13-year-old. Like I said, our girls are teenagers now. They're 13 and 16. But for our 13-year-old, it was definitely her sport. My 16-year-old, she definitely had other interests as well, like softball. But soccer just really, really stuck for me and my family. We fell in love with the sport. And growing up, we really didn't know much about soccer. My husband and I aren't soccer people. Their soccer wasn't really a thing when I was a kid. But through just, watching them play, the travel, spending the weekends on the pitch, we just fell in love with it. And so that's really how our love of soccer got started.
Now, I know a lot of times the kids tend to get their athletic ability from one part of the family. For you, was it you or Chris?
It was me, of course.
You're going to go on record saying that, right?
Okay. I will say it was half me. All right. My husband, Chris, he played football in college. He's an athlete. But, I played softball. I ran a little track. I grew up in small town in Mississippi, and I was a tomboy growing up. So whatever the boys were doing, I was doing. If they were playing football, that's what I was doing. Playing baseball, that's what I was doing, climbing trees. And so I think because of that, I developed a natural sort of athletic ability, love being outside. I love sports, and so it was sort of natural that our girls were going to be involved in sports. I mean, they did other things too initially. We tried ballet and other things and then realized that's just not really the family that we are. So we naturally gravitated towards more of the sports realm as a result.
So let's talk about since you mentioned Mississippi, we are more so a football, basketball, baseball state. Mm-hmm. Soccer is growing by leaps and bounds.
For sure, yeah.
But for you guys, what was it like initially when your girls took to soccer? Like, as far as making sure they were developing, or even further before that, did you notice that they had gifts in that sport, mm-hmm. or did it kind of cultivate over time?
Yeah. So a little bit of backstory. So, like I said, born and raised in Mississippi, I grew up a couple hours north of here. So when we decided to move to the Gulf Coast, which, from a geographic standpoint, our coast runs, east to west, west to east along the Gulf of Mexico between Mobile and New Orleans, right? And then, of course, our towns are dotted along the way. So when we decided to move to the coast from more central Mississippi, my husband, Christian, was actually still in central Mississippi for a time. So it was just me working with two young girls and trying to get them in activities. And so it was more of like a feasibility standpoint. I couldn't get them to the softball field in Long Beach and the soccer field in Gulfport. So even though we initially started out with softball, and they were very good at that because, like I said, they're natural athletes. For Evan, my 16-year-old, she loved it because she is sort of, she plays center back in soccer, right? So she's not all about that sort of racing all around the field. She's like, I'm going to stand back here in the back. I'm going to protect the goal, right? London, the 13-year-old, has always played up top, as we call it. So she's always been, a winger, a striker. So she is zigzagging around. She's my kid who never stands still. So when they were in softball, Evan loved it. That was more natural to her personality, right? I just walk up, I run and I catch a ball, walk up, I hit the ball, run around the bases, and then I'm done for a bit. London thought it was the most boring sport on the planet. She was very good at it. She could walk up and she could hit that ball and she'd hit a home run and run around the bases, and then there was nothing for a while. So she was a kid who was in the midfield just playing in the dirt or, picking flowers. And so after a while we said, okay, well, we've done softball. Let's try something different. So I put them into soccer. But like I said, I couldn't put one in soccer and one in softball because I couldn't get to two places. So I put them both in soccer. And then it just went from there. It was natural to London because she got to never stop moving. She was running around. She was doing all the things. And so that's what initially got us into soccer per se, right?
Yeah.
And as they continued to grow and develop in the sport, it became clear that they were very good at it. They picked up things naturally, but soccer, they were fun to watch. And with London, she just has that spark. She's very, very fast. She's always been very fast. Also, she was, like I said, she was just fun to watch. But she's always played striker initially. And sort of the goal or sort of the plan was just get the ball to London. And so we ended up playing some boom ball early on. They kicked the ball up top. She would get it, outrun whoever was chasing her from the other team, and she'd go and she would score. And she may score 6 goals in a game. But over time, she got to be a little bit older. People who know, friends of ours, coaches, just people in passing, they'd say sort of little comments like, she really did good in the game, but, that's not really, she's not really learning soccer, getting the ball and running in a straight line and shooting it and scoring is fun and all, but it's not really soccer. And like I said, we weren't soccer people. So my husband and I didn't really know what that meant initially. And so we kind of had to teach ourselves what it meant to really learn the game of soccer. And we had to research and we had to reach out to people that we trusted and that we knew. And they were like, yeah, she's kind of hit a flat line with the development. And so as we became more aware of that, that's what led us to kind of go on the hunt for other opportunities for her. Okay, well, how can we bridge the gap between where she is now and where she should be developmentally? Because for all these years, she's been kind of the fast kid. She's been more like a track star than a soccer player.
Yeah.
And so that's what sort of initially things look like with getting into soccer and figuring out where we needed to be. And ultimately, like I said before, is what led us to create Project Further.
So let's talk about that, because you said something interesting about being able to identify, right? Mm-hmm. Like when your kid is going from one level to another, transitioning from just being like someone on the team who is equal play versus one that's playing at an elevated pace. When you discovered that, like, what were your thoughts about, like, how do we constantly feed this development where, your girls can compete or go on a pathway to, like, more opportunities? Because I think before we get there, let's talk a little bit about, like, how this is structured, right? Mm-hmm. Because we all know local play is local play. Like, you can get a soccer team in pretty much most areas now, right? Rec ball. But if you're looking at a kid who is playing at an elevated level or want to maybe go college, D1, or even further, what does that pathway look like to the tip of the spear?
Right. So I think the first thing that you have to understand, and these are all things that we learned on the fly. Yeah. I had never heard of ECNL or GA, or it was, in our area, they're select. I mean, that is the highest level. It's travel ball, and that is the highest level of soccer. And so that was initially our goal. Okay, we want her to make the select team, right? Those are the good players. And so she made the select team. London, we're talking about. Really, both my girls play select. But as I said before, Evan my oldest daughter has decided that, playing soccer in college and beyond is not going to be her path. And of course we support that. And she has other goals and that's totally fine. But she plays select. Both my girls have played select. But when it became apparent that London was interested in playing further and going further in soccer, playing in college, playing professionally, we said, okay, well, what is that going to look like? So it took a lot of research, a lot of late nights, a lot of reading, a lot of watching videos, a lot of reaching out to people and talking to people, trying to find those opportunities. Okay, I saw this child online who's doing this training or who's doing all these things, and they're younger than my child. So why can't my child do that? Okay, how do I find someone who can teach her that? And so it really was a lot of digging. It really was. It was reaching out to people, like I said, getting true assessments, talking to people that I trusted, that I could go to and say, okay, can you look at my child and tell me where we need to be and what do we do from here? And from there, like I said, just trying to find the opportunities, whether that was online, phone calls, et cetera, beating on doors and saying, can my child come train? Can my child guest play with your team? And as you start doing that and you become more exposed to real life teams and players that are playing at a higher level, even if it's not the highest level, then you start to see, okay, well, that's where we need to go, right?
Yeah.
And then you figure out how to create a pathway for your child to get to that level. And then once they've reached that level, you say, okay, what's the next level? Okay, how do we go there? And speaking of levels, you kind of mentioned the pyramid, right, structure. So like you said, as far as, introductory soccer, it's rec in most places, right? More of like that, early development league type soccer where you have the kids that are mostly learning how to dribble and learning that the goal is to dribble the ball here and shoot in this goal, and the other team shoots theirs in that goal. Very, very basic information, mostly for fun, right?
Yeah.
And so that's rec. And then, of course, as kids get older, they can stay in rec. It's not just babies, but they can stay in rec if that's the level of play that they're aspiring to. Above that, in our area, for example, is select, more of the travel ball, okay? And those teams focus on a little bit more development, a little bit more technical learning, technical ability, going to tournaments to play, right? Competing against other teams, not just sort of a few little rec teams. Like you're going to other places, sometimes other states, to compete in tournaments and things like that. So that's more that select level, which is where my girls were. And then above that, and there are some levels in between, like, NPL, for example. But, the highest level in youth soccer, okay, is your ECNL, and for Girls Academy, okay? ECNL is a little bit of an older organization, so they're a little bit more established. Girls Academy is newer, but both of them are considered the highest level of play when it comes to youth soccer in the United States, okay? When it comes to ECNL, they have a girls division and a boys division. When it comes to Girls Academy, there's Girls Academy and MLS Next. But like I said, different parent organizations, but equal in terms of the level of play, right? This is the tip-top cream of the crop. Now, within ECNL and GA and MLS Next, you have different conferences, and within those conferences, you'll have the top of those conferences. So there are levels even within that, okay? But when you look at overarching the structure, ECNL, GA, MLS Next for boys is tip top. And presently, our daughter plays in the Girls Academy, okay? Because that club is that organization is 2 hours from where we live. Prior to Girls Academy, her Girls Academy team coming to be, we didn't have any options. The closest opportunity to play at that highest level for us was Birmingham, which is 5-6 hours from here driving, right? That there's an ECNL club there. So that's where we are at this point, and that's sort of the overall structure of sort of where you want to be if you aspire to play at the highest level. You really need to be ideally in one of those organizations if possible, okay? Because that's where the college coaches are looking. They're looking at those organizations. Those organizations will have showcases, and when they have tournaments, that's where the coaches and the scouts come. Because when you think about it, I mean, their job is to find talent. So they go to where the talent is, because that way they sort of kill a lot more birds with one stone as opposed to dotting all over the country to try to find kids. It was one of those things where even learning that doing well in high school soccer doesn't necessarily even get you the looks. You may be amazing, but if all you're doing is playing high school soccer in a place like this, a D1 coach from Stanford, from UCLA, from Duke, chances are they're not going to come and watch you play your high school game, right? Even if you're on a select team from a place like this, you're not the best in the country, right? You're not the best select team, the highest level select team in the country, the best NPL team in the country. So chances are they may never get a chance to see you. They won't be aware of you because you're not able to get in front of them. So those are some of the benefits to being a part of these organizations.
So I know we're going to address a lot of these things more in depth this season, right?
Right.
But I want to stay here at the origin of the plight. You mentioned some things that are about gameplay at the highest of levels, select teams, these things. Are we still speaking to play? Because there's a difference between play and development. Like a lot of kids could have natural talent where you may just out athlete most of your competition in your local market.
Right.
But you may not still be developing as a player.
Exactly.
Talk a little bit about the difference between how, because I want people to understand that Project Further, the mission is to help young girl soccer athletes and their families understand how to position yourself for an opportunity to play at the highest of levels.
Right.
But before we can get to that result, right, there's all these other things that factor in.
Right.
Development being something I always hear you talk about. Speak a little bit about that and the inequalities that you may see with boys who have a lot more resources and how girls may have to, I heard you say guest play or compete at a different way and approach just to make sure they're developing as soccer players.
Right. So I think that's a great point. So you mentioned play versus develop. I think that's the first thing that we have to understand. Okay. So when my daughter was with her select team, she was a great player. She could win the game. She could score the goals. Okay. But in terms of her technical ability with the ball, in terms of her touch, in terms of her decision-making ability, right? All those things are aspects of development, not just play, okay? And kids who go on to play at the highest levels, they have to develop properly. And proper development requires resources. It requires, number one, knowing what you don't know, right? We had no idea that my daughter wasn't developing because we didn't know what it meant. Okay. And fortunately, there's a good friend of ours who we're going to interview on one of the episodes as well, who was a coach who had the, I always say, he had the bravery to say, listen, she is not where she needs to be. And when I heard that, it was like a punch to the gut. I'm like, what do you mean? I don't understand what are you saying? She is winning games. She is scoring goals. Well, this is what it means. And then us taking the next step to say, okay, well, explain that to me. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about where she needs to be, and then let's create a pathway for her to get there. So that's the first thing. Parents have to understand there's a difference between playing and developing. And it can be misleading because when it comes to select, like there are sites that you can go to, and you can look at the rank of teams in the state. Right? You can go to the same tournaments all the time and you can play the same teams, even if they're, within an hour or 2 hours of where your home club is, and you can beat them every single year. You can finish first in that little division every single year and your child still not be developing. Okay? Because iron sharpens iron. You have to get to where there is a high level of play and coaching and learning that is going on in order for your child to develop. So that's the first thing is here. For example, what we struggle with and why we had to look outside of our home area and our home club was there was a lack of resources in terms of access to facilities, access to coaching, right? I mean, coaches who have played at the highest levels. You have some places, cities, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, they have professional coaches, ex-professional coaches who know what it looks like and what you need to do and learn and be in order to reach that level. Here we don't have that. So we've had to go out and find that for our girl, right? So that is the difference when it comes to development. So the first thing, like we said, is parents need to understand the difference. They need to understand what they don't know. And they also need to understand that the goal within an organization that is developing your child can't be simply to win games, right? We have a saying in my house, right? Win, lose, or draw. The question is, are you developing? At the end of the day, no one is going to remember if you beat that team when you were U14 and you played them on that second Saturday in June. Nobody's going to remember. Nobody's going to care. What did you learn from that? Okay. Did your touch get better? Did your decision making get better? Were you in an environment where you were encouraged to try things and be brave and make decisions and shoot the ball or pass the ball off? So that is the difference between development and play. Okay. In terms of inequity, like you were saying, between boys and girls, historically that has been an issue even at the much higher levels, with professional players, with the women's national team. They have worked tirelessly for years for equity and pay for women, and there's still a whole lot more to do. There's a long way to go, but just imagine if they're having to do that. Imagine what that looks like for girls whose goal is to play at the higher level, right? When you have professional players who have that same struggle as far as inequity, right? Here there are MLS Next teams. There's an MLS Next team in Louisiana, and there's also one that just started in Mississippi. And I know in one of our episodes we're going to talk about playing with boys and why it's valuable and why our girl does it, and what parents should think about when considering letting their girl play with boys. And there's value there. But that's one of the things that we do and we advocate for is our daughter getting a chance to play with boys. And so just to give you a little story, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. So I reached out to the MLS Next team in Louisiana. And actually the introduction was from the director of our club to the director of theirs. Said, hey, this is, April Ulmer and her daughter, London, plays with us. And she would love to train with your boys. Just train with them to help with speed of play and other things. And reflexively, the answer was, well, no, we don't really do that, and we don't want it to get confusing because other girls might want to try to practice with us. And we did it at first when there wasn't a GA, but we just want to keep it clear as far as pathway. And so, I had to interject and come back and say, listen, our daughter's not a casual player. These are the things that she's done. These are the places she's played. Our daughter goes above and beyond to find opportunities to get better. And so I had to clarify what the goal is and why we're asking to play with them. And we're still waiting to hear back. He kind of came back and said, well, okay, well, maybe just one practice and then we'll see, and then, it just kind of went cold. But sometimes you just kind of push a little bit. And then with the team that's here in Mississippi that just started, same thing, reached out and said, hey, could our girl come and try out, maybe guest play, that kind of thing with the boys. And the immediate response by email was, no, sorry, it's just for boys. And I said, well, actually, it's not. There have been girls, notable girls who've played MLS Next. Alyssa Thompson, for example, who obviously is a professional player, went professional in women's soccer right out of high school, is an amazing player. Her younger sister also just went professional soccer right out of high school. She was in MLS, Alyssa Thompson she played with MLS Next. And so once I sort of said that and pushed back a little bit and said, oh, okay, well, we're just kind of learning. Yeah, of course, she's welcome to try out, et cetera, et cetera. So even little things like that where you have to kind of, you kind of have to push on doors sometimes to say, listen, we're trying to create something here for our girl. Just we're not asking for a handout. We're saying she can hang with your boys, allow her to come and train, and you can see for yourself. But, sometimes the answer is we don't even want to see her, So there are all those things that I think that girls have to struggle with and work through that aren't necessarily true for boys in boys sport, youth sports on up.
I love that. And I know we're going to cover so many things this season that are going to help give resources to parents so that they can avoid a lot of these hurdles and the slow motion that you guys have endured.
Right.
And, before we wrap this episode, I want people to know what they can expect from you. Like what are you going to bring to this show this season that you want parents to leave this episode knowing?
Yeah. I want to bring, I think that what they can expect from Project Further is a lot of authenticity, a lot of realness. I'm not a professional at this. I'm a mom, my husband, we're parents, we're family. who is navigating these waters. And it really is like drinking from a water hose in terms of the volume of information that comes your way, some of it good, some of it not good, that you have to wade through. You know, we've dealt with disparaging comments from people when we first said, hey, we're interested in taking our daughter 2 hours away each way to train because that's what she wants to do and that's the only way to get her better. So helping families to navigate those waters, providing them with a resource so that hopefully they don't have to sort of make the same mistakes that we did in trying to find a pathway for their daughters to go further. I think that they're going to find value in that. You know, we want to create a community. We want to create a community because we're all in this together, we feel like. You know, it really does take a village in order to not just elevate the sport, but elevate our girls to the level that they deserve to be in terms of soccer. And so I think that all those things are going to be things that you can look forward to at Project Further. And like I said, just tons of good information, you know, just really, and the ability to ask questions and hear an honest answer, to hear about the things that we struggle with. As a family, you know, as a mom, as you know, the parent to a young child who has aspirations but still some immaturity, because that's what it means to raise kids. So we're excited. You know, we're excited about getting going and about getting to know each and every one of you and helping our girls go further.
All right, so I love your saying that you always say right before we end every conversation. If I remember it correctly, is always striving, always working, but always further. Maybe somewhere in there. Maybe
That's right.
Maybe I remember it.
Always pushing, always striving, always further.
Yes, indeed. Well, we thank y'all for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe. We have a lot of great information coming, and we haven't even hit the tip of the iceberg. You are getting a small dosage right now because we have some great things we're going to talk about in upcoming episodes about you guys going to Sweden.
Right.
I'm not going to say what it is
Right.
but it is
Very
soccer
excited.
related. Some of these awesome tournaments that y'all are in and you're traveling, and a lot of great things are happening. But you got to tune in. We can't give it all to you in one episode. So we'll see you in the next one.
Right. Next time.
All right.